Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, reviewing a Grizzly metal cutting bandsaw. Today I'll unbox and review the Grizzly G9742 metal cutting bandsaw. Now, I'm a knife maker, so I'll focus on its value to knife makers, but I'll try to give a flavor of the general performance so that metal fab guys, metal working hobbyists, guys like that, will have a sense of whether it'll work for them too. The saw came by truck freight. I ordered a much larger machine at the same time, so I paid for liftgate service. I paid about $900 for the machine and $180 for shipping. So all told, right at $1,000. The saw has a 64.5-inch blade and can cut stock with a maximum size of 5 by 5 inches. The motor is a half horsepower and you can run the blade at 3 different speeds using a pulley system. It comes with a sheet metal stand that you have to assemble yourself. Putting it together is simple enough. Since my blood courses with testosterone, I generally disregarded the instructions and had to redo a couple things along the way, but it was mostly just a matter of bolting things together in fairly obvious ways. The stand has no storage capacity, which I'm sure makes it cheaper. It'd be nice to have a door and a couple shelves, though. But you get what you pay for, I guess. I had an engine hoist at hand, by the way. The saw itself probably weighs around 150 pounds, so if you're a reasonably fit guy, you can assemble this without lifting gear. A partner would help. But it's a lot easier, safer, and less hassle with a hoist of some sort, or a second pair of hands. That's my mom helping out, by the way. Still spry at age 84. The saw uses a pulley system so that you can change speeds from 80 to 120 to 200 feet per minute. I'll be using this mostly to cut tool steel, so I'll leave it on the slowest speed. My experience with pulley systems on other equipment is that they're such a pain in the ass to reset that most people just settle on one speed and leave it there, which means that they give suboptimal performance and potentially cause premature tool wear. But then time is money, so if you're doing anything professionally, farting around with pulleys every single time you do a cut is really throwing money out the door too. So, that's just where you're at with a $1,000 saw. So, why did I buy this particular saw? There are quite a few saws on the market in this general size and power range, including some like the Harbor Freight model at about half the price. Now, the main reason I settled on this particular one is that it has a swiveling head that gives you 60 degrees travel in one direction and 45 degrees in the other. Some saws in this general price range, even some a good deal more expensive, have swiveling vices rather than heads. And these are mostly limited to 45 degrees and only swivel in one direction, and to adjust them you generally have to use a wrench. For what I intend to use the saw for, making mosaic Damascus and some light metal fab, the swiveling head is a huge advantage. It's faster, it's more precise, and there's no dicking around with a wrench and a protractor trying to get your angle set accurately. The saw also features a pneumatic feed mechanism. Basically, you just twiddle this little knob and you can vary the speed of downward travel. This means that unlike saws that require you to control the cut by hand, once you get reasonably dialed in, you can basically set it, walk away, and be accomplishing 2 things at one time, which is a pretty big deal for us small shop guys. You don't have to get this feed mechanism dead on, by the way. If you drop it a hair fast, the saw will just naturally slow its descent a little through the resistance of the material. There's a built-in work stop, which works okay. The stop allows you to index repetitive cuts to the exact same length. You have to kind of sneak in there with Allen wrenches, which is not insanely convenient. Sometimes, depending on the size of the stock you're cutting, the work stop can also cause the saw to jam when the cut's almost complete. Thinking through your setup will help you avoid this. The motor runs a little hot. Look, it's a Chinese half horsepower motor, so make of that what you will. There's also an automatic shutoff that turns off the machine when the cut's complete. I screwed around with it for quite a while, backed these little nuts in and out and in and out and in and out, and I never got it adjusted so it would cut off reliably when the cut was done. Until finally I realized that there's a travel stop bolt here that had been preset a little high at the factory and it wouldn't drop down far enough. I dropped it down about a turn so the blade would travel down a little further past the end of the cut. And voila, the automatic cutoff works just fine. I tested the saw on a bunch of different material. It cuts like butter through soft stuff like plastic and aluminum. Mostly though, I've been cutting steel, including mild steel angle iron, round stock and tubing, stainless tube, various types of carbon steel. The supplied blade's about what you'd expect for a supplied blade, which is to say, not exactly top of the line. Naturally, I ordered a higher quality blade, but that said, I figured I'd wear out the original first. I've been using the saw for a month, and the El Cheapo blade's still chugging along, and the good one's sitting there in a box. How fast is it? A big stack of 15N20 and 1084 takes roughly 5 minutes per cut. I cranked out enough steel for 3 billets of Damascus in about half an hour, including setting things up, adjusting speeds, and so on. Obviously, softer materials go way faster. A piece of rebar, for instance, only takes about 10 seconds or so. Delrin, even on slow speed, boom, done. When cutting more challenging material, like stacked pieces of tool steel for making Damascus, the saw tended to snag and stall. Honestly, I don't really see this as a design flaw. It's just about what you'd expect of a saw of this particular power level, cutting through material that can shift around during the cut. I'm sure I'll get more skilled with the saw over time and eliminate that problem, but it is something you have to factor in for certain types of cuts. So just a quick footnote about Grizzly. A lot of watchers of my channel over the years have noticed that I seem to own a ton of Grizzly stuff, and some people, kind of assume that maybe I'm sponsored by them or something. Now, I did do a video or two for Grizzly. Actually, it was 2 videos for Grizzly once upon a time, but other than those 2 videos, I'm not sponsored by them, and I've paid full price for every single piece of gear that I bought from them. Hey, by the way, Grizzly, you never paid me for the second video I made for you, so bygones, but just saying. Anyway, here's why I keep landing on their machines. First, they really do a good job of finding the sweet spot in terms of price and performance on all kinds of large shop tools. In other words, they pack a lot of features for the money. Also, better quality than, say, Harbor Freight, some other places I could name that are in that similar range. But feature for feature, they're cheaper than some of the other sort of mid-range gear companies, and way cheaper, obviously, than the really high-end machines, things made in Switzerland and that sort of thing. As far as I can tell, their stuff's almost all sourced in either Taiwan or China. It's a little rough around the edges sometimes, but I have never bought anything from them that fell apart or didn't perform at all. And look, maybe I'm just lazy, but they have a lot of stuff. You just open their catalog. They always seem to have a wide range of tools, so there's something on kind of a number of different price points. So I tend to find things there that are pretty competitive with, machines at a similar price point from other manufacturers, and usually at a price point that's, in the range that I'm looking for. One other quick note for knife makers especially, if you're on the fence about whether to buy an abrasive chop saw or a bandsaw, here's my 2 cents on that. Chop saws are cheap and cut very quickly as long as you aren't cutting really thick stuff. They don't work well at all on thick stuff. Also, chop saws have a really fat kerf, so if you make lots of cuts, ultimately you waste a fair amount of material. Bandsaws, on the other hand, are a little slower, but they cut more precisely and with far less waste. So, if you're a stock removal guy, a hobbyist who doesn't cut a lot of material, or you mainly just cut flat bar, there's a pretty good case for the chop saw because they're way cheaper than a half-decent bandsaw. Chop saws also take up less space, so if shop space is at a premium for you, and that's true of a lot of us, the chop saw wins hands down. Now, on the other hand, if you make Damascus, especially mosaic or high layer stuff that you're tiling or where you do a lot of restacking and rewelding, the bandsaw absolutely wins on all counts. Chop saws, they just suck at that stuff. Okay, so overall, this saw is really about what I expected. It'll cut everything I want to cut. It'll make acceptable quality angle cuts with very little fiddling around or adjustment to get to that angle, and it's good value for the money. Look, it rattles and jiggles a little, and if changing speeds all the time is important for you, the pulley system is not much of a selling point. So if you have 5 or 10 grand to spend on a saw, you most certainly will not buy this one. But hey, you already knew that, right? So look, let's be crystal clear. It's a huge upgrade over these midgety handheld job site or benchtop saws. This saw is pretty consistent with my experience with Grizzly gear. Not amazing, but very capable and lots of performance for the price. I'm happy with mine, and I'm sure it's going to get plenty of use going forward. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. You know, I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. WalterSorrellsBlades.com.